Chairman Pallone, Rush, Ranking Members McMorris Rogers, Mr. Upton, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to testify this morning. I'm Mark Menzies. I will be speaking as a private citizen, not in any official capacity, and my testimony is my own. I ask that my written statement be entered and printed into the record. Before I get to offshore wind, I too think it important to note that energy and commodity prices are at their highest in years. The cost of crude, gasoline, natural gas, even propane have increased dramatically over the past several months. Consumers are paying higher costs than they have grown accustomed to since the U.S. shale revolution and when the U.S. became the leader in oil and gas production. Offshore wind will provide electricity to consumers, but until our transportation and industrial sectors electrify, consumers will expect to be able to get energy when they need it at affordable prices. So what's not to like about offshore wind? Winds offshore are abundant, stronger, more consistent, more sustainable than onshore winds. They're off coastlines where populations are located. Since offshore and undersea, it appears planning and siting is less complicated than onshore wind projects. But things aren't always as they appear. Offshore wind is very difficult to site, build, connect, and estimate actual cost. One only has to utter Cape Wind to cause pause in this enthusiasm. When this committee faced this controversial project, we met with Danish officials who told us the answer was munis and co-ops. That's right, they had to require local ownership to gain acceptance. Not sure that's a solution here. A lot's been done to foster offshore wind. At the department, we created and funded the Offshore Wind Consortium, comprised of all stakeholders, selected NYSERDA, a state authority, to lead it. We had regular briefings from developers and planners. We released the Offshore Wind Market Report. We engaged our national labs to model and solve technical issues. We analyzed the environmental and siting challenges. We even had a blog. We also looked at costs. Our offices and labs modeled the cost of certain offshore wind projects using state-of-the-art technologies. The results appeared promising, but others now challenge both the estimated cost of planned projects and the actual cost of existing projects, and that consumer costs are actually higher. Cost of the proposed projects off New York's coast, those up and down our eastern seaboard, have been questioned, and still others now question the true cost in Europe, particularly in UK, where offshore wind has been operating for years. So consumer costs are an issue you should be aware of. And as you know, there are Jones Act and FERC issues. We had interagency meetings on the Jones Act, and FERC initiated a technical conference to examine its offshore transmission policies. Well, what can Congress do? Well, in 2005, Congress gave lead authority to the Department of Interior over all offshore energy projects, including wind, except in the Great Lakes, as you will recall, Chairman Rush and Ranking Member Upton. And Congress has sought to address the complicated federal, state, and local regulatory processes before. Perhaps the CZMA should be looked at, but that's likely outside of this committee's jurisdiction. But even then, states can ban offshore wind off their coast in state waters. In July, we saw what happened in Maine. A supportive governor signed a bill banning offshore wind in state waters. One can say they still support offshore wind, but in my view, states banning offshore wind doesn't make it easier, more efficient, or less expensive to consumers if you have site and operate projects in federal waters. And even if we're able to overcome all the issues involved with wind, we saw what happened in the North Sea just about a month ago when the wind stopped blowing. Grid operators turned to natural gas and coal to keep the grid operating. The cost of natural gas at an all-time high. A retired coal plant shuttered due to anti-fossil policies had to be restarted. At least 2 electricity suppliers went bankrupt. The only good news was that U.S. LNG exporters helped keep the lights on in the U.K. We've learned this lesson in the U.S. When our electric systems are stressed during cold winters and hot summers, grid operators turn to baseload power, natural gas, coal, nuclear, and oil, because wind and solar cannot ramp up to meet increased demand. We saw this in the 2014 polar vortex when operators relied on coal. During the 2018 bomb cyclone in the east, operators relied on nuclear, increased coal and oil sources as plants switched to oil to meet increased demand. And for the past 2 summers, DOE has issued emergency orders to California with its abundant wind and solar to run natural gas to meet high demand. Our system should be designed to provide power when consumers need it the most. For all the positives of offshore wind, until we have long-duration storage battery technology greater than 10 hours deployable at affordable cost, offshore wind will be a luxury to most Americans. Some predict that batteries will take the place of traditional power generation. Well, our current state of effective battery technology is 4 hours, and it takes years to site, permit, and build. In California, a 4-hour, 350-megawatt battery storage project on a solar project scheduled to come online in 2022 has been under development for 7 years. Long-duration energy storage, possibly the holy grail of grid storage, is still years away from demonstration and deployment. Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, offshore wind has great potential, but it's not without its challenges. I respectfully suggest that this committee might take time to consider other important measures to keep the U.S. the leader of energy production at affordable cost to consumers to ensure a strong economy and our domestic security. In my written statement, I mentioned several bills pending this subcommittee and why their passage will help achieve these goals. With that, Mr. Chairman, I conclude my statement and look forward to your questions.